Bitcoin, blockchain, ICOs, Ethereum, and all the rest. Are cryptocurrencies the 21st century unicorn, a speculative bubble, or the future of money? The CryptoCast will help you understand the rise, the fall of digital currency, the highs, the highlights, the potential, and the lows, the scams, and pitfalls. I'm your host, Jason Hartman, and we'll talk with some of the biggest names in the space. CryptoCast is your resource for all things crypto. Let's go. Hey, it's my pleasure to have my friend Mark Moss back on the show. He is an investor, an entrepreneur, a crypto expert, and just an all-around great guy who's very well informed about so many things in life. Before we started, we were just talking about the craziness that's going on in California. He just got back from Mexico, looked at property there on 2 recent trips, and it's great to have him back on the show. Mark, welcome. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great, Jason. Always a pleasure to sit down and talk to you. Thank you.
Absolutely feel the same way. So you got back from a surfing trip and you noticed that in Mexico, what some would call a third world country, or more politically correct, developing country,
right,
the power stayed on, which was not the case in the 5th largest economy by GDP in the world, the Socialist Republic of California, where you live and where I'm from.
Yeah, definitely.
So why is it that the power stays on in Mexico but not in California?
Yeah, it was definitely a very glaring difference. I am from California. I can't seem to leave the beach and the surf here. Plus, all my family's here. The weather's great, but man, they're making it hard to stay.
And you're in San Clemente, just for the record, right? Yeah.
In a nice little bubble down here, kind of insulated, but not insulated from the taxes and the crazy policies and whatnot. But yeah, as you just said, right? I mean, California is the richest state in the nation. It's the 5th largest economy in the world if it was a government, a nation. I mean, obviously, Hollywood and Silicon Valley are here. We have the highest state taxes in the nation. Not only the highest, but double the highest. Yeah. We have the highest energy. I think it's 6 times the average, our energy. And
highest, don't forget gas prices. I mean, that's energy, but, specifically gas prices.
And what was interesting is while I was in Mexico last week, we had rolling blackouts. The electricity was shutting off over and over and over.
In California, not Mexico.
No, in California. Right, so I'm gone. And we had a heat wave. It's September, so heat waves in California are typical. It was extremely hot, but it was not hotter than what is normal for this time of year. So yes, it was hot, but it was not hotter than what is normal. So we weren't having like crazy global warming extreme temperatures. It was just normal for this time of year. And that being said, our next door neighbor, Arizona, is way hotter, like 20% hotter. But while we were gone, not only was it hot, then we had the raging wildfires, which made the air quality really, really, really bad. Even where I'm at, probably 100 miles away from any fire, the air is bad. So the air is bad. It's extremely hot. People are having to work from home. Kids are trying to do school from home, and yet we have no electricity. And of course, that makes you think about a third world country that can't keep the electricity on. Right. I do spend a lot of time in Mexico. I've had 2 recent trips in the last month and a half. And where I was at in Mexico has 1 paved road and everything else is dirt roads. It's not a big town. It's not a resort town, but the the electricity stayed on no problem there. And so I'm with my wife and I'm like, man, do we even want to go home to California right now? Like the air quality is bad. The electricity is not on. We can just stay here and have electricity and air conditioning. And so
stay in modern Mexico. This is ironic that we're even saying that, but
yeah. And so, it makes you think and I am a market analyst, right? I'm on YouTube. And so I'll do a study of the markets and commentate on them. So, I pay attention to these things. And the thing that I think most people are missing is that what's happening in California, one, is coming for the rest of the country and coming for the rest of the world. So Mexico seems to be doing better now, but I believe this problem is coming to the world. And the reason why I say that is because the problem that we're having with electricity is not an accident. It's actually by design. It's actually been done purposely to get us to this point. And that's why I say it's going to come to the rest of the country, because the rest of the country is starting to adopt or wanting to adopt the same policies that California is. And then, of course, the rest of the world will also adopt them. We're already seeing it in some of the developed nations, like in Germany, for example. And so what I mean by that is that California is leading the charge on fighting back against climate change. It used to be global cooling, then it was global warming, and now they can't get it right, so it's just climate change.
They keep changing their mind, like as if the climate never changed before, right? But I mean, I admit that there is probably some climate change going on, but the question is, what's the reason? There are so many things to that onion, you'd have to peel back 1,000 layers to really dissect that argument. So it's just, it's just mostly being used as a political football to control people and tax them and have additional regulation, so that's.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And the problem that our world has shifted to is that everybody has this very short-term thinking and we've lost this long-term perspective. Mm-hmm. And so what I mean by that is we kind of manage everything very closely. So, the pandemic is a great example, but without trying to dive into that, but back to climate change, we're making a decision, like in California's case, for example, we make a decision to shut off all of our natural gas and coal electricity plants. In addition, shut down what is non-fossil fuel nuclear energy. So we shut down the nuclear plants. And the goal was to push everything to renewables, wind and solar. And that sounds great. And I love it. And in a perfect world, that'd be great. The problem is there's reality. That's the problem. And the reality is that wind and solar aren't enough. And so we end up in a situation like we are today where we had ideology to shut off coal and natural gas, which they consider fossil fuel. We also shut down nuclear, which is not fossil fuel, but whatever, they shut that down as well. And we had this great idea that wind and solar would work, but it doesn't. And so we end up with 6 hours a day of no electricity. And imagine this, Jason, for people that don't really grasp how extreme this is. Right now, California is still one of the strictest states in the nation as far as like lockdown and stay-at-home orders and things like that. So this is at a time when all businesses are closed. All office towers, all office buildings.
You
malls,
can't escape anywhere else, right?
And schools, everything is shut down. Schools are shut down. Malls are shut down. Offices, but everything is shut down. So who's using the electricity? So at a time when our electricity usage is very low because everything's shut down, we still can't keep the lights on.
That's amazing. Yeah. And, it is such a complete ripoff for parents who are having to homeschool. And can you imagine single parents having to do they're basically homeschooling, essentially. I mean, they produce some content on Zoom if you can get it when the power's on. Right. But, and there's no tax rebate for the fact that you're not paying for you're not getting a real school experience for your kids. So that's a complete ripoff. Yeah, it's just unbelievable. I haven't talked about it too terribly much on the show, Mark, but I have a little bit. Have you followed the forest management issue and the reasons for these wildfires? I mean, I remember when I was in Arrowhead with my girlfriend at the time years ago, and it was right after that big giant Lake Arrowhead fire. And, the guide who was this total environmentalist guy who was giving us a tour and telling us about the fires just right before we were there said, the reason we had the fire is because the environmentalists wouldn't let them clear the brush below the trees because it would disturb a beetle. Yeah. Okay, that was there. And so there was tons of kindling to just, fuel that fire. And if they would have allowed the brush clearing and some, reasonable backfire locations and so forth, it could have been prevented largely or, stopped quickly. And this is it's just crazy. It's like they want this.
I'm definitely no expert on the fire, so I don't want to put myself out as I am some, expert, but I have read articles from fire captains, fire chiefs, fire policy makers who have been coming out publicly saying exactly what you're saying. So many experts have been writing articles saying the exact same thing. I don't want to pretend I am one, but yes, they are saying the same thing. But in addition, all through in Northern California and Oregon, they've found several Antifa people setting fires. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, one guy set a fire, was out on bail, and 90 minutes later was busted again, setting another fire.
Yeah, and you know what they're doing? They're allowing prisoners to fight the fires, which I think is fine because it does give them a path, to when they get out, they can actually become a firefighter if they fight the fires in prison. That's the program. But murderers, rapists, and get this, arsonists are being allowed to fight the fires, and they can actually become firemen after their release. Real firemen, arsonists. I mean, you got to be kidding me. That's just the nuttiest. Only Gavin Newsom could think of that, and that was his deal with the inmates. So it is a crazy time. But
so the problem is that if you want to know what the country looks like when the Democrats take over, look at California, because it's Nancy Pelosi's the third ranking member in the U.S. and her state is California. Also Kamala Harris, who's now on the vice president campaign, was the Attorney General of California. obviously Gavin Newsom, et cetera. And so those policies, so the House Democrats, Nancy Pelosi led a bill to push this same energy platform that's happening in California. So her plan is basically the plan that's in California, and now it's coming for the country. That's why I said it's coming. But then you have really under the Biden platform, you have AOC and Bernie Sanders who are really setting the kind of the full more policy, and they're pushing the Green New Deal, which is even way more aggressive. And so we'll see even way more electricity shut down. And the thing is that they understand the problem, but they think that it's a necessary sacrifice. You need to be okay with going without electricity for 4 or 5 hours a day. You just need to be okay with that because that's what it takes to save the world. And
I'll bet you Nancy Pelosi has a built-in generator in her mansion for her Sub-Zero refrigerator with her ice cream in it. You know?
Yeah, and that's a whole other situation because in California, as I said, our electricity prices are already 6 times higher on average in the nation. So, for example, I know many parts of the nation, they might pay 6 to 8 cents per kilowatt hour. In California, we pay about 45. Put that into perspective. And so that's already really hard on the lower end, right? On the lower income people. But what they did with some of these rolling blackouts is if you wanted to pay triple, you could leave your power on. So that's even worse again. So not only does the lower income.
It's it's a whole elitist thing now. Yeah. Unbelievable.
Of course, it's in the name of equality, but yeah.
Right. Yeah. But not equality at all. So tell us what this means to the market. I mean, the real estate market in California was already, in the higher end areas of California. Certainly that's a cyclical market. It was already under pressure. It was already softening long before COVID. And, I'd been predicting that for years because the buyers were starting to reject the high prices. Now, with the low interest rates, it's got a little bit of a reprieve, but still those prices are very much out of whack with anything reasonable, right? So what do you think is going to happen in the real estate market there? And before you answer, there are 4 bills in California now, and, they'll probably get 2 of them through and 2 more will come later. One is repeal Prop 13, basically. I mean, these things all have nuance, but generally that's the
something
idea.
Different, but yeah.
Repeal Prop 13, Howard Jarvis's 1978 tax bill. I remember that when I was a kid. And then raise the highest marginal rate to like 16.4%, I believe, instead of 13.3 where it is now. And then have a wealth tax of 0.4% per year. Even if you make zero money or you lose money that year, they're just going to take some of your wealth. And then what was the other one? I can't think of it. A
10-year exit tax. So if you leave the state for 10 years, you're still liable for that. And they also have another one where if you sell your house and move to another state, you have to pay a big chunk of that sales price as well.
Unbelievable. I don't know if they can constitutionally get a retroactive tax through, but I wouldn't put it past them to figure out a way because, I only left California 9 years ago. So I could be liable. I could get a tax bill for that last year I was there.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, those are great points that you bring up. And the reason why that's important to everybody is because as you look at the real estate market, and you and I have had these conversations, there is no such thing as the market. There's thousands and thousands of little tiny submarkets. And so when you look at problems in California, like we're discussing, or problems, whether it may be in New York City or Michigan or whatever, you have to understand that affects other parts of the country. So while mass people might be fleeing a couple states, where are they all going? And that could positively affect those areas. And so you need to understand there's nuance there. And even inside California, there's nuance. So for example, I live by the beach in a small little beach community, and real estate here is nuts. It's going completely nuts. I mean, literally $3 million homes are getting multiple offers and selling in weeks. But then other areas like you mentioned, like Silicon Valley, for example, the home markets are weakening a lot up there. But then you go a couple hours from there into the mountains, like around Tahoe, and the real estate market's nuts again. And even here in Southern California, our mountains are called Big Bear and Arrowhead. I was gone, but I talked to people who were trying to go up there last weekend, and it's about a 2-hour drive up a windy mountain road. And it was bumper to bumper traffic going up and down. Every single hotel was sold out. So people are flocking to those areas. I have a friend who has a...
Well, they were just flocking there probably because it's cool. It's higher altitude, so it's much cooler.
Well, there's
and
part
if you can't
that,
have air conditioning.
Well, it's part that, but also I have a friend who's got vacation rentals out in Palm Springs, and he said he turns away 5 to 10 people every single day. And so people are trying to do like kind of staycations. and like, get me out of the city. I'm going to go to Palm Springs. I want to get away from people. Get me out of the city. I want to go to the mountains. And so those areas, even within like a Southern California or even a Los Angeles County, certain areas are doing way better than others.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely crazy. So the overall, I mean, you know, some people are starting to predict like a real estate crash in 2021. A lot of people said it would be here by now, right? But do you think that's going to happen? Now, of course, we both know, and everybody listening has to know, that there's at least 400 local markets in the United States, 400 MSAs. And within those MSAs, there are many more markets. Then there are product types by price range. What you gave the example of in your community, $3 million homes selling like that, you know, the rich are getting richer. We've all seen that this is a very uneven situation right now. But, you know, just give us your general thoughts on where we're going, what to expect.
Yeah. So, you know, the thing that everyone needs to understand, and when I look at the comments on my videos, and I'm sure you see the same thing, is that there's a lot of nuance, right? You have to understand, as I said, there's no the market. There's 400 markets, and then there's sub-markets and types and prices and whatever. So, for example, I think there's going to be a lot of softening in what we call like the McMansions. Those might be the, you know, $500 million price homes, particularly through kind of the Midwest and the Northeast, as the baby boomers want to leave those types of homes and leave the cold, the snow, and go for warm climates where they can play tennis and golf year round. They want to leave expensive places to go to cheap places. So I think there's a lot of softening there because one, a lot of people want to leave those areas, and two, we don't have the population, the demographics aren't there to move up and take those houses. So those types are going to be bad. But then in areas that have sunshine 360 days a year, very cheap, low taxes, et cetera, I see starter homes, you know, the bread and butter 3-bedroom, 2-baths that could still do really, really well. Mm-hmm. So you have to understand there's nuance to the market. But if I want to talk about the market generally, I would like to address one very, very big misconception.
Sure.
This is the one that I see from everybody. And again, I'm sure you see the same thing. And everybody who's listening probably right now is going, Mark's an idiot. He doesn't realize there's 40 to 50 million people unemployed.
Yeah, Mark is definitely not an idiot, folks. So keep listening. All right, go for it.
So let me just say first, I do understand the economy sucks. I do understand there's 40 to 50 million people unemployed. I do. And I believe maybe even worse than a lot of other people that a lot of the economy might not ever come back. As a matter of fact, a lot of the damage happening to the economy might not come back. So I get it. 40 to 50 million people unemployed. I get it. The economy, people aren't making money. I get all those things. I get the real estate market's getting more expensive. I get that. But let me tell you something different. So the markets, the stock markets, the real estate markets, the gold markets, and the economy have become disconnected. They don't mean the same thing. And you can see this. So for example, since the pandemic broke out, the real estate market crashed, 50%. It's now rallied back up over that and now to new all-time highs while 40 to 50 million people are out of work. How is that possible? When no one's buying anything, no one's going to malls, no one's going to dinner, how are these stocks through the roof? Well, that's simple because the stocks and the markets are disconnected. So that is proof that just because 40 to 50 million people are out of work and the economy sucks, that's proof that also the real estate market could rally. And so you have to understand that the government, the Fed, the central banks, whatever you want to call it, are putting policies in place to mitigate this. So there is definitely a probability that real estate crashes. And I do believe in lots of areas and different prices and types it will crash. But I also think there's areas that will do well. And you can't discount what the government intervention will be. So for example, they've already... I'm so glad you said that. Yeah. Yeah, you can't understand what the government intervention will be, just like they've intervened in the stock market. They've pushed the stock market higher and they can also push real estate up. So they've already done forbearance on evictions, done forbearance on foreclosures. They could make it where nobody ever gets evicted. They could decide to just pay everybody's rent for them. They could decide to give a bunch of money to the hedge funds and have them start buying non-performing loans. There's a lot of things they could do to shore this real estate market up to offset whatever damage is happening from the economy. And so you can't ignore that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. You know, everybody, you see all the talking heads out there, they're saying this thing. So what happens when the stimulus ends? Well, I'll tell you what happens when the stimulus ends. There's another one after that. Okay. And then there's another one after that because everybody's a Keynesian now, especially around election time. But even after that, if Biden gets elected, God forbid, okay, but if Biden gets elected, then he's not going to want anything to be bad on his watch, especially at the beginning. So he's going to dole out the goodies. And plus, he's a Democrat. So he's going to dole out the goodies. And,
exactly.
Trump is going to do the same thing. It's, folks, and our rich Uncle Jerome Powell has said that, he's just made no bones about it. He's going to just create money, buy whatever security he needs to buy whatever bonds, he needs to buy. They're just going to make it all better. They're going to paper over it, which means, well, I think it means inflation. I mean, classically, at least it does, but they seem to have evaded that to some extent.
You're absolutely right. And without dipping into politics, but you really can't understand money without understanding politics. And so when you look at the left, that's really kind of pushing that side of the aisle. Really what they're pushing is Marxism, and they're calling it, equality and this and that. And so if those ideas win over and we're already seeing more influence of that just means more stimulus going out to the people. That means more UBI. That means more help, more assistance, whatever. And so I believe, as you said, right, I agree that whether it's Trump or Biden, they're both going to do what they can to push the economy.
Same deal.
But maybe with the left even more. And so, like you said, I don't see at any point they wake up in the morning and go, let's live within our means. Let's not create money and let's stop supporting people. No, they're going to continue to do stimulus.
Yeah. Suddenly I had a dream about the Austrian School of Economics, right. And I think we should be prudent and have sound money. Never going to happen.
Never going to happen. If nothing else, they've been emboldened by this, because now all of a sudden they're like, shoot, I guess we can print $6 trillion and nobody seems to care. As a matter of fact, they like it if we just give them a couple bucks. So shoot, let's go to 20 trillion, and we'll give them another $1,200, right? So if anything, I think they've been emboldened and we'll see more of it.
You're absolutely right. No question about it. What does this mean for cryptocurrency? You're a Bitcoin fan, and I think you're still a fan, maybe even more of a fan now.
Yeah, of course. So, all of this, and I know this sounds hyperbole maybe for a lot of people, but I really believe that pretty much every problem all boils down to the money. Every problem we have boils down to the money. The divorce rate is high because we don't have a sound money. What are you talking about? That's stupid. Divorce is because we don't have sound money? Yes, because without sound money, we have a divide between rich and poor. Before, when we had sound money, one person could work and you could have a house and a car. Now 2 people have to work and you still can't get ahead. What's the number one cause of divorce? Money, right? So everything boils back down to the money. So I made a video recently, and you have like a tree, and then you have all these leaves on the tree, and all the leaves are all the problems. And we could sit here and talk about each little problem and how we solve each little one and nitpick on every leaf. But at the root of the tree is the money. That's the problem. Because what happens is there's 330 million people in the United States. Each one of those people are irrational. I mean, we're rational in our own mind, but we're irrational to other people. We all have wants, needs, and desires. Today I want this thing. Tomorrow I want something else. I don't know why. I just changed my mind. How do you coordinate 330 million people and their wants, needs, and desires? How does the market know that I want black shirts and now I want white shirts? How does the market know that I used to like cars and now I like trucks? How does the market coordinate all the materials and labor that go into building those trucks, et cetera? And it's done through money, communication.
Yeah.
And what happens is when the Fed creates currency, they distort the communication. And now we get wrong signals, and now the economy can't organize. And so what happens is now we have Jerome Powell and his 12 buddies sitting in a room. They're trying to organize what 330 million people want, but there's no way they'll get enough data. They can't do that. So central planning is always going to fail. The only way to have communication inside an economy is through money. And so anyway, Bitcoin fixes that. Bitcoin goes to a money that cannot be manipulated. And so we could get accurate price signals, accurate communication again, which I believe could then fix everything.
So why do you think that a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin has a better communication system than, say, the dollar? You're just saying because it's got a limited supply of 21 million units, right? Is that why it's a better communication system?
Yeah, exactly. So, gold was a really good communication system for a really long time. The problem with gold is that its properties cause it to be centralized. It's so big and heavy. Let's put it in a vault, and then we'll just use paper certificates. And once you centralize it, then you manipulate it. And the problem, back to your question, is how does it cause the miscommunication? Well, when you have money has a true cost of capital. So in order to get gold out of the ground, I have to spend money, time, resources, equipment, etc. There's a true cost to bring that gold. It's about marginal. I can make, the cost to bring it out of the ground is a little bit less than what it is on the market. And the inflation, the stock to flow, the amount of existing gold and the new incoming gold, the inflation is predictable and it's very limited. So it's a limited scarcity resource. With the US dollar, there's none of that. So what would typically have to happen is, in order for me to get some of your gold, I would have to provide you with a good or a service that you wanted. And then you would be willing to trade me some of your gold for my goods or services that I'm providing to you. But what happens when the government just comes along and says, hey, Jason, here's $1 trillion. Go have fun. They've messed up every pricing signal. And we can see this all throughout history. And I'll just give you a super quick example of this. So way back in Africa, they used these beads for money, and they were called cowrie beads, and they were glass beads. In Africa, they couldn't produce these beads very well, so they were scarce. People made them, but it was very expensive at times for them to make them, and that's what they used as money. Well, the Europeans came to Africa, and they saw how they were using these glass beads as money, and the Europeans were much more advanced at that time. And they said, shoot, we can go make these beads in mass in Europe. So they did. They went home back to Europe. This is a true story. This is history. They went back home to Europe and they made tons of these glass beads for super cheap. Then they went to Africa and they basically threw all those beads into the economy. They inflated the money supply and they just bought up all their assets with fake, cheap money. Now that is what led to the slave trade. And now the cowrie beads were then called slave beads. And it was all because of inflating the money supply with fake money. We've also seen this in Germany used to bomb other countries with fake currency to inflate and mess up the money system. Right. And so that's why the former Soviet Union and a lot of those Eastern Bloc countries would have these rules that you can't leave the country with any currency. You can't leave it and you can't bring dollars in. They didn't want you to pollute their stupid closed system because it would mess up their central planning ability. But people around the world, Mark, they look at the dollar as the thing, that's the one go-to currency, right? Is that changing with the rise of Bitcoin over the last 10 years? Well, what's changing with the rise of Bitcoin over the last 10 years is education. And all of a sudden people are now interested and they're learning. And so really, I know this goes a little bit deep and people have a hard time receiving this, but really if you look at the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913 and they created this fake money and they're like, well, everyone's been using gold as money. How are we going to get them to use worthless pieces of paper that we can create as much as we want? And so they said, I have an idea. What we'll do is we'll create the Federal Reserve. And then what we'll do is we'll make people work all year to collect these fake pieces of paper and then give them back to us at the end of the year. So they created this.
Yeah, that's why they had to create the IRS right after the Federal Reserve, by the way.
Exactly. Yeah. And then what they've done is they've purposely left out education about money, but even lied to you about what money is and how the system works. Right. Now, Henry Ford famously said, I love his quote, he said that if the people understood the banking system, there would be a revolution overnight. Yeah, and so people have been purposely misled or lied to about what money in the dollar is. They don't understand what money is. If you ask people what money is, they really couldn't give you an answer. Oh, it's that dollar in my wallet no. And so people don't understand what it is. If they did, they would wake up to it. And so Bitcoin has created this thirst for knowledge, and really the internet has obviously helped that. And as people start learning, they're like, what the heck? What are we doing? This is ridiculous. Yeah. And that's really what's changing things.
And that's good news. That's good news for sure. Okay, good. Well, anything else you want to go over just in general, like, any kind of points you want to drive home, a question I didn't ask you, about whatever topic, what's going on in your mind and what are you doing on your videos?
Well, I think the big thing that I really talk about on my videos is that, as I just kind of alluded to, right, the education system has misled you at best and lied to you at worst. The system is not there to support you. And again, this might be hard for a lot of people to receive, but what you've been taught about health is wrong. What you've been taught about healthcare, it's wrong. What you've been taught about money, it's wrong. What you've been taught about everything is wrong. And so really, I just love to share information to just empower people and encourage people to go and learn and research on your own, because no one's coming to save you. It's really up to you. Right. And just like what you've always said a lot, I say a lot as well, is that, money goes where it's treated best. Yep. And so, as you started opening with, I've had 2 recent trips to Mexico. I've been looking at real estate in Mexico. I've been looking at real estate in other parts of the country. And so I think it's just important for people to pay attention to what's going on, the politics and the policies in different states and different countries, and really just observe what's happening so that you can position yourself, your wealth, for your family, for long-term success.
I agree. I think that's a great point. And, maybe you think that you can't do it now. When I lived in Orange County, I lived in Irvine and Newport Beach in Southern California. When I lived there, I wanted to leave for many years. It took me a long time to kind of get the guts to do it, to get my business together to where I could do it. But I finally did it. And, just make a plan to get into a place where your money is treated better. And remember, your money is just an exchange for your life. It's your time. That's all you have. That is your entire existence, is the amount of time you have. So when the state, whether it be a state or a federal government, I just mean the state, conceptually the political state, when it takes your money, it's taking your time, it's taking your life. So you've got to minimize that burden to whatever extent possible. That's very important. So make a plan to do that.
The last thing I'd like to say too is what I really pound the table on as well is that I'm sure a lot of people listening to this also are like, oh, that's ridiculous. I would never buy Bitcoin. I would only buy gold. Or no way I'd buy real estate right now. And then they have all these kind of preconceived notions in their head and reasons why they don't do or don't like different assets. But you have to understand that our job is not to pick the one thing that's going to perform best for us. Like, you don't just have one choice. Like, why not own gold and Bitcoin? Maybe you own a lot more gold because you believe in it more. Maybe you only have 1 or 2% Bitcoin, but why not?
Well, hopefully you own a lot more real estate, but yes,
whatever, or whatever it may be. But yes, have real estate, have some stocks, have some gold, have some Bitcoin, and be well-rounded. And that's why I said, right, take the time and observe and what's going on. And it's not about choosing the one right thing. Build yourself a nice rounded portfolio.
Yeah. Good stuff. Mark, give out your website or YouTube channel or whatever you want people to know.
Yeah, the best place to keep up with me is just YouTube. So just go to Mark Moss just on YouTube. And then I'm super active on Twitter. So it's just the number 1 Mark Moss. And so I do videos a couple times a week, 3 videos a week on YouTube. If you like these types of topics. And then I said, I'm super active on Twitter.
And they are excellent, by the way. So keep up the good work. Mark Moss, thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. Be sure to check out the show's specific website and our general website, hartmanmedia.com, for appropriate disclaimers and terms of service. Remember that guest opinions are their own, and if you require specific legal or tax advice or advice in any other specialized area, please consult an appropriate professional. And we also very much appreciate you reviewing the show. Please go to iTunes or Stitcher Radio or whatever platform you're using and write a review for the show. We would very much appreciate that. And be sure to make it official and subscribe so you do not miss any episodes. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.